Welcome, everyone, to our celebration of the Ayn Rand Institute's 2021 Atlas Shrugged Essay Contest winners. It's an auspicious occasion to do this, since today is the day after Ayn Rand's birthday. She was born in 1905. She would have been 117. Her book, Atlas Shrugged, her magnum opus, was published in 1957. That makes it 65 years old. Even so, today it still continues to sell thousands of copies every year and continues to make the headlines. So this is a book of enduring significance that's worth having an essay contest about. This is part of why the Ayn Rand Institute sponsors this annual contest about the novel. We've done so since 1999. It's been our tradition to announce these results, the winners of the contest, usually by posting the winners on our website. But last year we started a new tradition of hosting these online ceremonies to discuss the top essays and announce the winners, and to give you, the readers, and the contestants a better idea of the thinking that goes into selecting who is the winner. It's also just a lot of fun, because this is where we get to see the payoff for a lot of our efforts and your efforts. So my name is Ben Baer. I am a fellow and instructor at the Ayn Rand Institute. I also teach in the Institute's Objectivist Academic Center. Our agenda for today is as follows. We are going to reveal the winners of the contest at the very end of our session today. We'll start with a little bit of background about the contest. We're going to talk about the general kinds of things that we look for in winning essays, and we're going to spend the bulk of our time looking at some really great passages from the finalist essays that were submitted this year. Exceptional passages to give our audience more insight into what makes for a great winning essay. If there's a little bit of time at the end, we'll do some Q&A, but we'll then announce the results, the third place winners, the second place winners, the first place winners, and if we put up on the screen here, I'll show you how many of each we're going to have. There'll be 5 third place winners whose identity is yet to be revealed. Each of them will win $500. There'll be 3 second places, and the grand first prize, of course, is the much coveted $10,000. You'll be sitting in your seats waiting to see who won. I will make one other announcement at this point, and that's to remind you that since we're going to be looking at excerpts from these essays, and since the essays obviously sometimes dig into the details of the plot of Atlas Shrugged, there will be some spoilers. You might find some things out about the novel which you wouldn't want to find out about if you haven't read it at all, and if you'd like to have the pleasure of reading it for the first time. So just be on guard. You won't necessarily know when they're coming. If you haven't read it at all, maybe read the book first and come back, watch the recording later. So I'd like to now bring onto the stage my colleague. He's a senior fellow and a vice president at the Ayn Rand Institute, Keith Lockitch. He has overseen the development of this essay contest over many years. And hi, Keith.
Hi, Ben.
So maybe it's worth asking you how Atlas Shrugged made a difference when you read it for the first time. How did you first hear about it, and how did you read it?
Well, I first heard about it because my parents introduced me to Ayn Rand's novels, and I read them all in order. And by the time I got to the end of Atlas Shrugged, I was in high school, and it was nothing short of life-changing. I could see that this is a thinker who's challenging the conventional wisdom of 2,000 years and has a radically different way of looking at the world and challenging you in terms of how you think about what your life is going to be and what the world should be like, and that sort of thing. So it had a huge impact on me. And obviously today I'm a vice president at the Ayn Rand Institute. So obviously it was pretty life-changing for me.
So tell us more in your capacity as overseeing various educational programs at ARI, something about the history of our essay contests, this one in particular, and the essay contest program more generally.
Yeah, so the Ayn Rand Institute, or ARI, was founded in 1985, and the essay contest was the first major program of the Institute. The idea in founding the Institute is we're the Center for the Advancement of Objectivism. So our mission is to educate people about Ayn Rand's writings and her ideas, her philosophy. So the idea of having an essay contest where students read her novel and engage deeply with the ideas and submit them in order, in hopes of winning a prize, it was a great idea, and it was the first program that we launched. So that started in 1986, was the first essay contest year. Just on a personal note, I actually entered the Fountainhead Essay Contest in 1987, just the second year it ran. I didn't win, but I think I was a semifinalist or something like that. So the essay contests were a very successful program. Students got really engaged with the Fountainhead, and over the years we decided to add more contests for the other novels. So we introduced an essay contest for Ayn Rand's novella Anthem in 1993, and then eventually the Atlas Shrugged contest began in 1999. And I think from the slide here, you can see some of the data. I mean, over 440,000 students have entered the contest, or at least entries. Some students are repeat participants. So across all of our contests, 400,000 essays we've received, almost 30,000 for Atlas Shrugged alone over the years. More than $2.2 million in prizes we've given out over the years. 11,000 student winners around the world. So it's been a really impactful program, and has made a huge difference in just introducing people to these ideas and getting them to think deeply about what Ayn Rand stood for.
So Keith, I imagine we might have some teachers tuning in to see how their students did in this contest, and especially since they're here, could you say more about another program that we have at ARI, which is one we introduced, I think, to complement the essay contest program, which is the Free Books for Teachers program?
Yeah, so the free books for teachers program, if you don't know what it is, it's a program where if you're a teacher in high school and you want to use one of Ayn Rand's novels in your classroom, we will literally send you a classroom set of books or digital copies to use with your students. And this program, it was actually an outgrowth of the essay contest, because we have these essay contests, we're trying to promote them, and we were talking to teachers and finding out how we could try to encourage more participation in the essay contests. And one of the surprising things that we found is that some of the reasons that teachers gave for why they weren't able to teach the novel or enter the students into the essay contest was simply that their departments or didn't have the budget to purchase a classroom set of the books. And we thought, well, what if we were to give you a classroom set of the books? Would that be something you would be able to take advantage of and that you would use? And the response, so this was around 2002, and the response was overwhelming. I mean, there were lots of teachers who recognize that even if you don't agree with Ayn Rand's ideas, these novels are intellectually engaging. Kids get excited reading them and debating them, and they spark the kind of debate and discussion that teachers love to have in their classroom. And so we had a lot of teachers taking us up on this offer. We don't just give them out randomly. It's teachers have to request them on the premise that they plan to teach them in their classroom. The teachers want to add them to their curriculum, and we make it available to them. And so as I said, this program has been running for about 20 years, and to date, we've given more than 4.7 million free copies of Rand's novels to teachers. 65,000 teachers in North America have taken advantage of this program and introduced Ayn Rand's works into the classroom, and had an opportunity to educate students about what her philosophy is. Yeah, actually, let me say a little more about that, because the Ayn Rand Institute is an educational organization, and our mission, our goal, is to advance Ayn Rand's writings and her ideas in the culture. And so we're trying to get these novels into the hands of students and get them taught in classrooms. But what's interesting is that the teachers and the students, the students who write essays for the essay contest, or teachers who use their novels in the classroom, what they're looking for and what we want them to get out of these things is not necessarily that they agree with Ayn Rand, at all, but that they have an understanding of what she stood for, and that they have an opportunity to discuss and debate the ideas that she's taking up in her works. Um, it's uh, the As I said before, teachers find that they never fail to get deep intellectual engagement from their students, and uh, that's the value that these programs bring. So it serves our mission to have the books go out and have students read them, but we're not necessarily looking for everybody to agree 100% with what she stands for, just that people get educated about what she stood for, what she actually stood for. There's a lot of distortion and misrepresentation of her ideas in the culture, and so one of the goals that we're trying to accomplish is for people to read what she actually wrote and discuss her ideas and see what she actually said. So that's so these are so these programs, the essay contest and free books program, are very important, a very important part of what we do. And we're really proud of the quality of the essays that we receive. We've got, as you'll see later today from the excerpts that you're going to hear, we have really bright students participating in these contests and thinking deeply about Ayn Rand's ideas. And we're just really proud of the students and the teachers who participate in the programs, and the success and impact of the programs.
Yeah, each of the questions that we assign students that you'll see excerpts from the answers to challenged students to really grapple with the deeper ideas of Ayn Rand and not just the superficial accounts that you sometimes hear, and our winners succeeded in doing that. So thanks very much for that background, Keith. We will hopefully have you back at the end today, or well, we might not have you back. Is that right?
Yeah, maybe not.
We're gonna say goodbye now. But thanks for telling us about that. And I want to now bring on to the stage another one of my colleagues. Thanks, Keith. Keith mentioned how he had done the Atlas Shrugged essay contest when he was younger. I also did the Fountainhead. Well, I think maybe he did the Fountainhead. I did the Fountainhead contest or I tried. I was about to do the Fountainhead contest in 1994. I never got around to finishing the book, but I was really interested in it anyway. We have, however, in our presence, Sam Weaver, my colleague, who's a junior fellow at ARI, who actually entered and won the Atlas Shrugged contest. Was that in 2019, Sam?
Yes, it was.
Well, I hope this is some inspiration for those watching. One of the things that you can do when you win a contest is to go on and do more work about Ayn Rand's ideas at a place like the Ayn Rand Institute. So, Sam, why don't we start by saying just a little bit about the data we have on the people who entered the contest this year?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to share that. So this year we had, for the Atlas Shrugged essay contest, 568 total entrants. Of those entrants, 31% were high school seniors, 12th grade students, 41% were undergraduate students, and 23% were graduate students or students in advanced degree programs. And those participants came from 41 countries that we had all around the world. We had, of course, participants from the United States and Canada, but also from all over the world. We had participants from Brazil, Egypt, India, Israel, Nigeria, Poland, Taiwan, and many other countries. And out of those 41 countries and 568 participants, we came down to 25 honorable mention recipients and 9 finalists whose essays we will discuss tonight, who were our prize winners. We will also reveal the name of the 25 honorable mention recipients on our website after this discussion.
Great. And so we should also tell you a little bit about the process that we use to decide on the winners. We rely on volunteers, people who we've become associated with through our various educational programs. So people who we are pretty confident have a good idea and a good understanding of Ayn Rand's ideas, or understand the novel Atlas Shrugged very well, and then they move on to one person who decides the final rankings. So how do we make those final decisions? What makes for a winning essay? Well, share a little bit about that with you. One important thing is just that the essays are going to stay on topic. We give a definite question, and we're looking to see that somebody has answered every single part of the question. We hope that they've done that in a way that's logically organized. We are looking for exceptionally clear style, no typos, not even any spelling mistakes, and crystal clear grammar. But most importantly, we're looking for essays that display an understanding of how the ideas in Ayn Rand's philosophy relate to the events in the story, and doesn't treat these as separate from each other. Sometimes we get essays just about one, just about the other, but all of the questions that we ask really challenge you to integrate both. And the winning essays display superlative success in their understanding of how the ideas relate to the events and the characters of these stories. So without much further ado, I think we should start looking at some of the finalist essays, and we want to show you choice excerpts from the, I believe, top 9. Each of these is one of the placing essays. We won't tell you which placed which yet. That'll be at the end. But let's start with the first of our questions. Now, when you often hear about Atlas Shrugged in the popular media, it's often portrayed as a kind of political drama, and that for this reason it's fought over often by political partisans, some who love it, some who hate it. But it's really a story that's about much more than politics. It deals with it's animated by Ayn Rand's philosophical worldview, but it's a worldview that goes to much deeper and much bigger questions than simply political economic questions. And our first question is a question about politics, but it's one that gives the writers a chance to relate a political controversy to a deeper ethical question in particular. So here was the first prompt that we assigned this year. Sam, do you want to read this for us?
Sure. Yeah, the first prompt said, in Atlas Shrugged, the society's leaders enact a series of laws and directives, the Equalization of Opportunity Bill, Mouch's directives about the railroads of Colorado, Directive 10289, etc., that exercise increasingly arbitrary power. Describe one example of a recent government policy decision in your country that resembles one of the edicts in Atlas Shrugged. How has this decision been justified by today's leaders, and how do their claims resemble those given in Atlas Shrugged? In light of the story, what do you think Ayn Rand would expect to be the consequences of the policy you've described? Do you agree with her? Explain your answers.
Excellent. So we'll go straight into talking about some of the answers that we got to this question. For some of these excerpts, they'll deal with more with one part of the question. Some of them will deal with more with the other part of the question. But we'll start just first with looking at examples of the policies that our essay writers chose from the real world to compare to the events of Atlas Shrugged. So this first excerpt comes from a student named David Chavez Salazar from the Escuela Superior de Diseño in Barcelona, Spain. And he chose the following policy. He writes, over the past 3 years, Colombia has experienced an increasingly intense war against economic freedoms. The last attack occurred in April 2021 when the government approved the new National Energy Plan. The stated objective of this policy is to eliminate the large conglomerates of the energy industry to allow the entry of dozens of new producers. To achieve this, a vertical disintegration of the electric energy production chain, generation, transmission, distribution, and commercialization will be carried out. From now on, a company will only be able to engage in one of these 4 activities, but not all of them simultaneously, as is currently the case. By its economic nature, this plan resembles the Equalization of Opportunity Bill, which is from Atlas Shrugged, which limited the number of businesses any one person can own to one. In this case, the mandate would be no person or corporation in the electric power industry may have business in more than one subsector. So one thing that I thought was interesting, Sam, about this essay was we chose this question expecting to get a lot of answers from, especially from North American entrants who were going to write about various COVID policies of the United States government and other European governments, perhaps. And we did get a lot of those, but I'm happy that it wasn't all about that. And here was this, and we did ask about different policies in your country. And I don't know if David is from Colombia, but it's a good example. This is a real and actual parallel. It's what, and the impact of it in the story is that one of the main characters, Hank Reardon, who owns a steel company, is forced to divest of a variety of different mines that he owns, which are vertically integrated with his steel production. He's acquired them because it makes the production of his steel more efficient. And in the story, when the government splits apart his different businesses and forces him to sell off the mines, it's portrayed as really tearing apart his life, because he's poured his blood, sweat, and mental energy into the construction of this life and this company, and now the various people who have nothing to do with it are arrogating themselves the right to tear it apart. But why don't we also take a look at what the consequences in the real world of this kind of policy are? David also explains this with regard to what he thinks is going to happen with the regulation in Colombia. He writes as follows, and he's pretty thorough about this. He says, the first effect is that by leveling the playing field, opening the market to anyone, businesses would move away from those who can best manage them. This is the case with Reardon, who was forced to sell his mines to the incompetent Paul Larkin, or Dwight Sanders, who sold his aircraft plant to his untalented brother. If this were done by hundreds of entrepreneurs, the consequence at the microeconomic level is bankruptcy, and at the macro level, a fall in the productive capacity of the economy. The second effect is that the conditions in the industry would become unbearable. Entrepreneurs will live under the constant yoke of very aggressive state regulation. Therefore, it's to be expected that the best will leave the industry, just as the most successful entrepreneurs did in Atlas Shrugged. However, the worst part is who will be the beneficiary of all this. In this plan, entrepreneurs are seen as sacrificial lambs that, under altruistic pretensions, are forced to fragment, sell, and even abandon their companies to serve the interest of small producers. This represents a flagrant violation of their rights by denying them the possibility of expanding the markets and incomes. Likewise, their possibility of defense will be null before a legal system based on irrationality and injustice. I hope you can see from this excerpt a little bit why this novel is called Atlas Shrugged, and here we are entering into our first major spoiler territory. It's called Atlas Shrugged because it shows what happens in a world when the producers go on strike. And David's answer, I think, appreciates that and appreciates the connection that we can draw to the real world. And while it's always challenging to make economic predictions about what's going to happen in the real world, we'll have to see what happens in Colombia. It is noteworthy that when producers were divested of their control over their energy production industry in Venezuela, this is basically what happened, that the producers fled Venezuela and the country became a basket case.
Yeah, and the idea that that David is calling out here as what the government officials are using to justify their policy is the idea that some people should be sacrificed for the benefit of others. And David points out that there's this idea that the people who own energy companies and have built these companies and run these companies need to sacrifice their interests for the benefit of people who run smaller companies. And he points out that that's similar to what is done in Atlas Shrugged. And one thing I think is interesting about David's example and what he's described as the effects that he thinks will come from this policy is that it's not just the owners of the big industry firms that will be sacrificed, although they certainly will be, but also the interests of many of the people in the country will be sacrificed if there ends up being a fall in the productive capacity within kind of the overall economy of the country. So it's the sacrifice of a lot of people's well-being for the benefit of this group of up-and-comers in the energy industry.
Yeah, and that's the first indication that what we've got here is a moral question, not just a political economic question. Sam, why don't you go ahead and read the next one from, I believe, Maya?
Yeah. So this is from Maya Ganesh at Bowling Green High School in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And she writes, the eviction moratorium enacted by an order of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, is a prime example of a directive that showcases the exercise of arbitrary power. The CDC justified its order on the ground that evicted people would crowd shelters or stay with extended family and friends. This, the CDC claimed, would be detrimental to public health by facilitating the spread of coronavirus. Thus, decreed the CDC, it is for the greater public good in the face of a pandemic that evictions be suspended indefinitely. The eviction moratorium is very similar to the bond moratoriums imposed by Mauch, Thompson, et al. In Atlas Shrugged. Property represents a form of capital that is loaned out to tenants. The rent is identical to an interest or coupon payment on a bond. The bond moratorium removed recourse for bondholders who supplied capital when the interest payments were not made. The bondholders were forced to sell their bonds for 1/3 of their value.
So we got, as I mentioned before, a lot of essays on various COVID policies. This is one of them. Interestingly, among the finalists, there were also several essays talking specifically about this eviction moratorium. I think Maya's essay was definitely the best among those, that because it really explained in very precise way the exact similarity, and you can see her doing it here in point by point, and explaining why there's a similar kind of capital restriction being placed on the people who have this bond moratorium, in just the same way as there was with the rent moratorium. She also did a really good job, I think, showing what the consequences of this would be. We'll talk about that in a moment. And she also had a second policy in Atlas that she compared to the rent moratorium, which was Directive 10-289, which I won't go into now, but I think she also did a good job with that one. But let's take a look at a second passage from Maya's essay where she says something about the consequences. And this one will be shorter because I'll sum some things up for you about it. So she writes, Ayn Rand would expect if this eviction moratorium, whether de jure or de facto, continues, the United States rental housing stock would be transformed into a giant version of the failing Taggart Transcontinental. Just like deteriorating Taggart Transcontinental rails, deteriorating housing stock would stretch from sea to shining sea. And that's her overall conclusion, which needs to be supported. But she has a lot to say in support of it. She offers a real point-by-point explanation for why she thinks this could happen. She talks about how if you decrease rental income, it'll mean decreased maintenance. Fewer people will be willing to become landlords because they won't be able to be rewarded for it. The housing supply will decrease. It'll be harder to get loans to build new properties. Those who could get them wouldn't want to risk it. In the end, one of the biggest victims, she says, will be the people who can't get affordable housing. That's not all, though. So, Sam, I know you had some comments on this passage, too.
Yeah, I just want to put more attention on this point about the deterioration of the housing stock, which I think she makes this really, I think, colorful parallel of the deterioration of housing stock from sea to sea, like the deterioration of the Taggart Transcontinental Railroad in the novel. And I found this just to be, first of all, a striking comparison, because one of the things that you really notice about the country in Atlas Shrugged is that things are sort of falling apart. All sorts of things, not just the railroad, buildings and infrastructure, all sorts of things are falling into disrepair. And it's, I think, a really striking part of the novel, and it makes a lot of sense. And Maya explains some of why. It's if it becomes more expensive and riskier to invest in things, invest in property, invest in maintaining and improving. She's talking about rental property, but it applies also to railroads and any other thing that you need to invest money to maintain. As it becomes costlier to do that, and the future benefits of that become more uncertain because of these sort of government policies that you don't know where they're coming from, people will become less willing to do that, and you'll start to see a real kind of decline in the quality of the goods and services and infrastructure that are available. So I think we wanted to talk a little bit more about this idea of Atlas shrugging and people sort of being unwilling to continue their kind of productive work by looking at another essay that was on the same topic. And this one came from Austin Kilgore, who is a student at Londonderry Senior High School in Londonderry, New Hampshire. And Austin writes, first, she would expect the landlords to act in such a way as the producers of her novel did throughout the story. Strike. Why would a person decide to join a line of work that expects a large amount of devotion of time and effort, not to mention risk of losing the capital investment, only to be met with an insecure income stream due to the nature of a government and society that doesn't respect property rights? In Atlas Shrugged, the answer is clear. There is no reason to do so. In fact, there are current incentives to sell rather than hold real estate properties. According to the Freddie Mac House Price Index, as of July 2021, there has been a 20.11% increase in the index price. Judging by every environmental factor, political or economic, landlords have every reason to end their practice as soon as they are allowed to do so by the government.
Yeah, so I said before that Atlas Shrugged is much more than a political or economic tract, and the passages we've shown so far have mostly focused on the economics. But in this one, even you start to see that there's a moral issue that's arising here, because part of the reason why someone would want to quit is because they believe their rights have been violated. And we're going to see more about this in subsequent passages. But it connects back to that point that I was making about Reardon, about how when that equalization of opportunity bill goes into effect, splitting up his businesses into sub-entities, selling them off to other people, part of the effect on him is not just economic. There's a moral effect on him, because he has spent his life trying to build a life by providing values to other people in exchange for payment, and he's earned his payment. And the fact that he's earned it that's a moral estimate of him. And part of the reason people feel justified in taking these things away from him is they'll say it's evil to be selfish. And I mentioned what the title of the book refers to, Atlas Shrugging, is the idea of those who are creating these values one day deciding, well, what if we want to stop being quote unquote evil? Well, then we wouldn't be making money, but we also wouldn't be producing these values for you anymore. And what are the consequences of that? And this is, of course, all meant to help challenge the notion that there's something evil about wanting to earn an honest living. So,
and I think, yeah, I was just going to say, I think we're going to hear more about that, the injustice of it, in the next passage from Annika.
Yeah, so this is from Annika Selka, who's at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. And she writes, throughout Atlas Shrugged, the politicians and bureaucrats argued that their directives and plan were necessary on the basis of the national emergency and the people in need. When these plans inevitably led to further economic collapse, the argument was repeated, and the government continued to seize more power over the economy. That the existence of national economic problems and people in need or dying justified unprecedented power grabs has also been an argument in the United States, where it has been widely suggested that the unprecedented national emergency of COVID-19 justified the eviction moratorium, another eviction piece. The focus of the policy made by the government is merely expected to result in an outcome that looks better. Empathy is extended only to those who may be evicted due to breach of contract should they not pay their rent, not to the landlords who lose money due to the policy. One thing I think we see in this passage from Annika is a better view of the view of morality that's used to justify what Ayn Rand is portraying as injustice. It's the idea that it's not the creation of values that generates someone's awards that they deserve, but simply the absence of having created any values, which is what need is. Annika's passage shows this. She shows how policies that are based on that kind of standard, that standard of need, actually only lead to the very thing that they started with, which is the absence of values, because they destroy creation by disincentivizing it, by ripping different producers' lives apart into different pieces. So another thing that I thought was interesting about this passage was that it shows that when you act on this idea, and when you use it to justify various forms of state control, it leads to a kind of downward spiral, to the kind of disintegration and decline of civilization and of the economy and of industry, the kind that Sam was talking about before. I should mention, I think this is one thing that makes Atlas Shrugged unique as a kind of dystopian novel. In a lot of dystopian novels, what you have is a big oppressive government that has all this high-tech control over everybody. And you don't see that in Atlas Shrugged. What you have is every time the government intervenes more in people's lives, things fall apart more. Even the government falls apart. It loses control because of the control that it tries to extend. You get more anarchy, and you get hints of that in what Annika's saying here.
Yeah, I think another aspect of a downward spiral that it comes up in what Annika's saying in this passage is that very often it's the case that unjust laws beget more unjust laws as the government passes unjust laws that make matters worse and create more of a crisis. Very often, the advocates of need will then use that crisis to advocate for further controls, further oppressive laws, further unjust laws. And so it sort of compounds the injustice by creating uncertainty about the future, and it creates this sort of downward spiral effect where things get worse and worse as new crises come up and are used to justify further interventions, which lead to further crises, and so on and so forth. And speaking of the justification, we talked about the kind of the idea of need that comes up in Annika's passage. I think another passage gives a somewhat different take on the same kind of justification, speaking to the idea of the public good. And this was from Madison Reed's essay. Madison is a student at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, Alabama. Excuse me. She writes, in the US, despite the extensive government stimulus programs, countless businesses could not withstand the constraints they were burdened with and likewise collapsed. The common result of both of these scenarios is that the wealth-producing capacity of the country was greatly diminished. The response from socialist-bent political leaders to such a scenario is invariably the increase of government aid to those in need. The public good is always touted as the main concern in regard to policymaking, such as when the statement, "the people need it, need comes first, so we don't have to consider anything else," was offered as justification for the passing of Directive 10289, one of the most severely controlling government directives ever considered in Atlas Shrugged. Similar rhetoric is used by US politicians to support the never-ending extensions on government stimulus and aid programs. So this public good justification, as I mentioned, it's closely related to the need justification, the idea that somebody's need of something is a moral claim and claims that they ought to have that need satisfied by someone else. And Madison's answer mentions the appeal to need, but she also talks some about this element of the public good, which I think is an element of an idea that it's called collectivism, the idea that the beneficiary of our actions should be the group or society as a whole, rather than any of us as individuals. It's the idea that the individual's life is unimportant, and what matters is service to the group or to society. And I think this comes up in the quote that she cites from Atlas Shrugged, where it says, "The people need it." I think that reference to the people is a sort of collectivist reference. It's a collectivist appeal, because when you're talking about the people in this context, what they're talking about is just the group, everyone, the whole society. They're not even making a reference to sort of specific people who need specific things. It's this idea that the group needs something, the group demands it, and so that's reason enough, no matter what individuals are harmed along the way.
And that last point that you just made, Sam, is important, because the connection between the public good justification and the need justification is important. It helps show which really comes first. It exposes the fact that collectivist justifications to this vague public, as you were referring to it, that's really window dressing. What it really means in practice, what the idea of the public good means in practice, is taking something from one person and giving it to another. And it means taking it from the productive people, giving it to the unproductive people, as in the case of ripping Reardon's business apart and giving the pieces to someone like Paul Larkin in the book. So that was our first, that concludes our first set of essay excerpts from our first question. We've got two more, but now is maybe a good time to take a little commercial break, as it were, because we wanted to share with you who are watching some resources that you can use to learn more about some of the ideas we've already been discussing, and we have more to come. So Sam, could you tell them about our free books program?
Yeah, so we offer free copies of Ayn Rand's novels to students, and you can request a free ebook copy of another work by Ayn Rand by going to aynrand.org/free books. There are a lot of options to choose from, and it's really up to you what you want to read. But if you've read Atlas Shrugged and maybe also her novel The Fountainhead, well, if you haven't read The Fountainhead, that would be a good one to read next. That's another excellent novel and a good companion to Atlas Shrugged. Or if you've read Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, it might be worth looking into some of Ayn Rand's nonfiction books, where she wrote essays commenting on philosophical issues and applying them to kind of events that were happening in the world around her. And a good place to start in her nonfiction would be The Virtue of Selfishness. But as I said, there are a lot of options to choose from, and if you are a student, we encourage you to go to that URL, aynrand.org/free books, and request a free book.
I should say this is a distinct free books program from the one that we talked about at the top of the event, the one for teachers. So the one for teachers involves requesting books in bulk. The one you just mentioned, Sam, this is for individuals who'd like to order copies for themselves. Also say something about another resource, which is our reading groups. If you've read Ayn Rand's fiction, like if you've read Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead or We the Living or Anthem, you might also be interested to know that Ayn Rand wrote a number of nonfiction works that expand on her ideas beyond what you see in the novels. They present her philosophy in nonfiction form. If you're interested in learning more about these, exploring these works, we have reading groups you can join that are facilitated to focus on peer discussion. One of our junior fellows helps, several of our junior fellows help to facilitate these. Sam is actually one of them. We're currently running groups on Ayn Rand's book, The Virtue of Selfishness. Great place to read about Ayn Rand's ethical theory if you've just read her fiction. We're also, I think, doing some on her book, The Romantic Manifesto, her artistic treatise, and Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, which is her most technical work on the topic of theory of knowledge. If you go to university.aynrand.org/reading-groups, you'll see which groups are going right now, what time they meet. You can sign up for one to join. And I know Sam is having a good time helping to run these along with a number of our other junior fellows. So let's, I don't know, Sam, did you want to add anything else about the reading groups before we go to the next prompt?
No, I'll just give it from my own mouth that it's a lot of fun doing it, and we get into some really interesting discussions. So I hope to see more people sign up for those.
And there are people from the groups who I believe have placed in this essay contest, right? So that doesn't hurt either. So
Yes, that's
let's
true.
let's take a look at the next essay prompt. And this was no longer a political topic, no longer economic. This one is literary, asking you to look at Atlas Shrugged as a work of literature. And I'll go ahead and read this prompt and give you the next excerpt, Sam, as we've been doing. Prompt 2, Francisco d'Anconia presents himself as a playboy who is abandoned serious concern by his family's business. But in the story, Dagny realizes that Francisco's public persona does not fit with the man she knows. Compare Francisco to another major figure in film, TV, or literature who adopts a similar double life to accomplish his purposes. How is he similar? How, in terms of his motives and methods, is he different? What kind of purpose could make the price of leading a double life like this worth paying? Explain your answers. Now, the reason that I think we chose this question is because there really are quite a lot of possible answers you could write about here. Uh, Everything from Batman, Zorro, and the Lone Ranger to a major character in a play by Schiller. So let's see which comparisons people came up with. And I think we have answers from two of our finalists that we'd like to share today. So, Sam, who's the first one from?
Yeah, the first one is from Rachel Johnson, who is a student at Brigham Young University in Rexburg, Idaho. And Rachel writes, Francisco d'Anconia from Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and Jay Gatsby of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby live similar double lives to disguise their true intentions. In doing so, these characters adopt similar methods, including their efforts to portray a playboy, party hound persona. However, their differing personalities, motives, and values lead them to opposite outcomes. Francisco's pursuits succeed due to his trickster personality, rational value system, and forward focus on clear goals. Gatsby's efforts fail due to his obsessive personality, skewed value system, and impossible focus on recreating the past.
I thought this was a very creative choice for a comparison. I've read Great Gatsby like 2 times, and this never occurred to me. But when the author of the essay put it this way, I thought, yeah, this is a relevant comparison, and it makes for a good essay, especially because of the fact that the comparison where their similarities are very superficial. Uh, the differences, however, are profound. They're both trying to live a double life as a kind of playboy. Yes. However, they have very different reasons, very different character traits that are moving them to do what they're doing.
Yeah, so do you want to read the passage that'll get a little deeper into how Rachel examines these differences?
Yeah, I should do that. So this is also from Rachel. Gatsby's main reason for creating a double life was to win back his past love. He's obsessed with the past. Gatsby put his past relationship with Daisy on a pedestal. Eventually, he realized that it was not worth his years of focus. Francisco claims that his love for Dagny inspired him to live his double life. While one may say that this is similar to Gatsby's actions, it is not. Dagny's passion for her work and rational outlook on life remind Francisco of the horror of his society's moral crisis. When she finds him in Galt's Gulch, he describes this saying, "That was my first love, that state of the human spirit. I left you to fight for it. And I knew that if I were to lose you, it was still you that I would be winning with every year of the battle. Only this moral commitment to the liberty of the human spirit could make a double life rewarding." Now I think that's really good. And it points to the fact that what really makes the difference for Reardon is that he's fundamentally driven by values, not by fear of having lost a past love. For him, Dagny is an important value in his life, but she also stands for and represents and embodies other values in his life that are achievable even if he can't have her. Um, I should say that one thing that I think this essay just narrowly missed the opportunity to do, uh, but which it had its finger on, was the fact that Gatsby is in effect looking to the past, trying to recreate the past, and Francisco is looking to the future, which is entailed by a concern for value pursuit. And that's something that Francisco is often portrayed as doing in various scenes in the novel, thinking about the future, looking forward, and expecting great things to happen.
Yeah, I just want to underscore that point about Francisco seeing his values as achievable, kind of even without Dagny, because I think it points to Francisco has this value motivation that is not reliant on whether or not Dagny ultimately decides to be with him. Of course, he would very much like her to choose him, but this quote kind of brings into focus that even if she doesn't choose to be with him, he's going to be able to go on being Francisco, and he's going to be able to keep pursuing values and achieve a wonderful life. And I don't think that level of independence is really present in Gatsby.
Well, let's take a look at our second finalist who did one of these literary comparison topics. This one comes from Mariah Williams, who is a graduate student at Regis University in Denver. And she chose to compare Francisco to the character from the Baroness Orczy novel, The Scarlet Pimpernel. She writes, "The Scarlet Pimpernel hides his identity so completely that he remains a mystery to all but his closest associates. His quest? To rescue members of the French aristocracy from the guillotine during Robespierre's reign of terror. This literary character provides an excellent study in comparison and contrast to the unique role Francisco adopts within Ayn Rand's final novel. Both the Scarlet Pimpernel and Francisco d'Anconia submerge their true natures for a reason to accomplish their purposes. The respective motives and methods vary, however. Secretly masquerading as the Scarlet Pimpernel, Sir Percy Blakeney cloaks his true identity in a persona that differs significantly from his own. In Atlas Shrugged, on the other hand, Francisco maintains many of his strongest traits even while feigning pursuit of a hedonistic lifestyle of chasing women and spending and squandering his family's reputation and wealth. Francisco, too, seeks to blend into the fabric of ongoing society life, but by doing the opposite, playing up most of his natural strengths to mask the one that has intentionally gone on strike, his productive capacity. I have to admit, Scarlet Pimpernel is definitely one of the other characters I had in mind that I was hoping somebody would write on when they did this essay. And it's a book I've also read and enjoyed very much. And I'm so glad that Mariah picked it. And one of the other things that I think makes this a good choice, so I mentioned the previous one, there was a superficial similarity and a really big difference, which is a fine way to answer the question. But it's also interesting when you find two characters where the similarity isn't so superficial, where there's a deeper similarity, but there's still a deep difference. And in the case of the Scarlet Pimpernel and Francisco, unlike the Great Gatsby, both of them are fighting for real values. They're fighting for something positive, at least, right? But there's a big difference between the two of them in what the values are, in what types of values each is standing up for and celebrating. And Sam, why don't we take a look at the way she explains this difference?
Yeah, let's do that. So she writes, "But it is the nature of their respective purposes where the two heroes diverge most strongly. Percy's duty of care hinges largely on the protection of the monarchy and the right of the ruling class to maintain its place in society. He is an English nobleman supporting the French aristocracy and ultimately rescuing the young Dauphin, next in line for the French throne, from the guillotine by the end of the story. While Ayn Rand might well support the rescue of any child, the philosophy behind the Scarlet Pimpernel's overall rescues as he risks his life and his love relationship for members of the French aristocracy differs greatly from the intent she assigns her character. The idea of aristocracy itself strikes directly at her core values, as expressed in her summary of her philosophy, in which she identifies productive achievement as man's noblest activity. Francisco is the character she uses to illustrate this new form of nobility. Like Sir Percy, Francisco is born to money and the positions and power it could provide. Yet he stands for nobility based not on birth and inherited wealth, but on developing one's capacities and earning one's wealth. He envisions industrial trademarks replacing coats of arms, and believes the test of each new generation is the capacity to keep and build upon the money received.
I gotta say, this is so good. When I was reading this part, and when she got to the part about how Ayn Rand was opposed to aristocratic values, and Francisco uh, stands for this kind of new kind of aristocracy, I was thinking, oh, please mention the part about the coat of arms. Please mention the part about the trademarks. And then they did, and it's like, so this is exactly what I was hoping somebody would do, and Mariah saw how to do it, and it's also a really good articulation of how there is a view of morality behind the scenes, not just behind the scenes, often in the forefront, and this is what is propelling the producers to go on strike in this story, that it's not just an economic question for them. Um, Mariah quotes the sentence where Francisco identifies productive achievement as man's noblest capacity. Or rather, I think that's from another character, but this is what Francisco is acting on in the name of man's noblest activity. Well, that's saying that something is moral and inspiring, not just to some kind of necessary evil. And it's something that Francisco has to try to convince the various different producers to come to see in the course of the novel. It's what he's saying in order to convince them to go on strike. It's what he's trying to say to Reardon, whose life has been torn apart by things like the Equalization of Opportunity Bill, why he shouldn't have to live under that kind of situation, under those kinds of conditions. And of course, Francisco himself is already on strike, but he's taking a special form of strike. That's why he has to live this double life. And part of the reason is so that he can try to convince others to go on strike. And Mariah, I think, does a good job of explaining why he needs to have some familiar characteristics, but not others. Of course, the other reason why he has to live this double life, which I didn't see anybody mention, is the special fact about his industry, which is that the copper mining takes less intelligence to do than other industries. This is the way he explains it. And so it has to be more actively destroyed. He has to actually spend it down and help things fall apart, rather than simply abandoning it where the other industries would be abandoned overnight. His won't. That's why he has to stay in the world. But I still like a lot of what Mariah brought out and what others brought out about this kind of case.
Yeah, I like the point that Francisco had to sort of still display some of his admirable qualities in order to get to Reardon and other people, and convince them to trust him and to at least listen to what he's saying, but at the same time had to mask some of those other admirable qualities so that people wouldn't suspect that he was intentionally destroying his company. So she brought out that he's doing a really subtle game, which is not the case with all of these double life type characters. And she mentions that it's not so much the case with the Scarlet Pimpernel, who's more kind of straightforwardly acting like a playboy. Another thing that I thought was really good in Mariah's essay was, and in that excerpt, was the point that she brought out the fact that both of these characters, the Scarlet Pimpernel and Francisco, inherit wealth, but they take very different attitudes towards what one should do with inherited wealth. And specifically talking about Francisco's view that the heir needs to put in the work to grow the fortune rather than sort of just inheriting it and living off of it. And so drawing out the fact that they start from similar points, I think, made the difference in their values that much clearer.
Yeah, all of this really helps bring out how complex and fascinating a character Francisco d'Anconia is in comparison with similar characters in the genre, in effect, of the double life character. So I'm very thankful that Mariah saw all of this. Let's take one more commercial break before we get to our last set of excerpts from the third prompt. And this is some resources for teachers. Sam?
Yeah, so we've mentioned a couple of times already during this broadcast, but we want to mention it one more time and give you the link. Teachers can order a free classroom set of Rand's novels from us. If you go to the URL aynrand.org/free novels, you can submit an application to receive free copies of her novels. You can choose from several options, and we even have an option for ebooks for at least one of her novels. So this is a great way if you want to teach Ayn Rand in your school. This is a great opportunity to get the resources you need to make that happen.
And it's not just the books. We also have help on curriculum. If you go to bit.ly/ARI-resources, there are teacher's guides that will give you ideas for how to use these novels in your classroom. Sample lesson plans, I think, are there. And of course, we see the essay contest itself as a aid in that regard. It helps to motivate students to read the books they might want to enter the contest. So let's get back to that for our last prompt. Sam, why don't you, and I should mention before we go into this, that the third prompt is, I think, the most philosophical of the prompts. All of them touch on Ayn Rand's philosophy in one way or another, but this one really asked students and writers to dig deep into some of the deeper fundamentals of Rand's ideas.
Yeah, so the excuse me, the third prompt says, after quitting her job, Dagny thinks to herself, "It is not proper for man's life to be a circle, or a string of circles dropping off like zeros behind him. Man's life must be a straight line of motion, from goal to farther goal, each leading to the next and to a single growing sum, like a journey down the track of a railroad, from station to, oh, stop it." How do Dagny's thoughts here relate to the wider dilemma she faces at this point in the story? How does her dilemma relate to the wider themes of the novel? Explain your answers. And I think we wanted to start off by,
we'll start off with some excerpts that explain the connection between this metaphor and this dilemma that Dagny is facing. And the first such is from Leah Deegan from Pasadena City College in Pasadena, California. And she writes, as soon as Dagny arrives in the countryside, she starts to be productive, conceiving of ways to improve both her property and the town's infrastructure. As hard as she tries to suppress it, her problem-solving mindset never comes to rest. However, after sufficient experiences demonstrate that her drive to improve is not appreciated in an apathetic community, Dagny confines her work to the smallest unit, her father's country cabin. But while she sees gains from employing thought to change the environment around her in small ways, she struggles to square the individual actions with the broader purpose that they require to be meaningful. She had intended the dates to lead to a purpose, but she could not say whether she had reached it or not. She believes that she's facing an ultimatum: either work in this world or work nowhere. When Francisco arrives at her cottage, she describes her dilemma. It seems monstrously wrong to surrender the world to the looters, and monstrously wrong to live under their rule. I can neither give up nor go back. I can neither exist without work nor work as a serf. She understands that if she remains to produce, she will face increasingly absurd hindrances to her projects, but her conviction in the temporary nature of the madness and her spiritual need for production both work as forces of gravity that keep her attached to the looter's ground. So I think first, this is she's done a really good job here identifying the dilemma and really finding the perfect quotations to sum up Dagny's thinking that are leading her to see her life as this unending series of zeros leading to nowhere. The problem is that if she's working for Taggart Transcontinental, she can't work on her railroad without becoming a slave, without being a slave driver. No one is being allowed to achieve that growing sum that she thinks that a life should be. It's also important that this is the first time in the novel which she sort of goes on strike. Now, she doesn't do it with the other strikers, but because she's gone on strike, at least in a temporary way, without Taggart Transcontinental to work for, she doesn't have this central purpose that she sees. She wants to have that growing sum growing towards. And she can't find even an equivalent of it when she's living in this small town. Francisco shows up to try to convince her that she needs to stay on strike. And of course, he eventually wants her to join him. but she has a lot to learn before she's ready to do that. And we'll say a little more soon at some of the other excerpts about what it is that she has to learn.
Yeah, and several of the excerpts about this topic talked about Francisco and her conversations with him, and things that he says about purpose. And I think something that's interesting that's going on in the background here, and Leah's talking about it. Dagny's in this kind of impossible dilemma. She can't she doesn't see a way to live without working, but also the working conditions are becoming very, very bad and almost intolerable. She can't really conceive yet of having a kind of big central productive purpose that doesn't connect back to the world where all of these controls and problems are present. And I think that's part of what's going on. And every project she thinks of ends up connecting back to someone else, to the world as it is, and it becomes a roadblock for her. Francisco has figured out a way to have a central purpose that isn't reliant on sort of living in this dilemma. But Dagny can't really conceive yet of how to build a purpose for herself that is separate from society. So there's a real conflict for her in that.
Well, Sam, why don't we take a look at how Leah explains what's causing this dilemma, and which is the key to Dagny's solution to it in the story.
Sure. Leah writes, Dagny's dilemma is one that every creator ultimately has to face. She can solely overcome it through the realization that each creator, in fact, bears greater responsibility for the system's continuation than previously believed. The creeping laws, regulations, and redistribution plans that steadily approach greater serfdom can only come into effect in a world that has enough wealth and productive capacity to survive, a world that commands resources to redistribute in the first place. Thus, by their pursuit of productive achievement in a morally corrupt world, the rational, most industrially capable members of society provide the means by which the looters can parasitically subsist, evidently without ever coming up with a critical discovery or value-creating business venture of their own. Notably, the awareness of the nature of their power shatters another assumption of Dagny's perceived dilemma. As long as the creators are the stewards of their minds, they aren't bound to any particular place to produce. So long as free thought lives on within them, they can gain knowledge and create productive ventures from anywhere.
So I think this is really what she's highlighting here is really important and deep, and it's also related to why the producers who are going on strike at this point of the novel are going on strike. What they've realized that Dagny hasn't yet is that by staying in the world, she's empowering her destroyer. She's empowering the people who worship need and who want to punish productiveness. And it's not simply, I should note just as a sidebar that the way that she's empowering them is not simply by offering them material support. It's not just that she's working hard and making money that they can then take from her, though that's a big part of it. There's also a very important moral dimension here, where by continuing to work under the system, she's helping them to believe that they are right. She's helping them to rationalize that they can get away with this kind of morality of need and destruction, when in fact it's only she who's helping them and that they can't do it on their own. And so in order for her to finally realize that this is what she's doing, she has to realize in the deepest way how wanting to live and create values is a choice that she's making, that they're not making, and that because she has the right to be happy, she doesn't have to live under this kind of system, and she doesn't have to live with this dilemma, that she can find a purpose that she can achieve so long as she's not creating and sustaining the people who are actively working to tear the different pieces of her life apart.
Yeah, I think this issue that Leah discusses here, the point that Dagny and the other producers are sustaining the looters by doing their productive work and achieving their goals. It's an important point and something that is really a major emphasis of this chapter, which is called "By Our Love," and it's something that Francisco says that that Dagny sort of being held prisoner by her love for the railroad, by her love for her career. And that's really the source of this dilemma, is that she loves this so much that she's willing to take all of this abuse and go through all of these difficulties, and even, as Francisco is pointing out, prop up the very people who are harming her. It's because she loves the railroad that she puts up with all of that, and she has to figure out how to find a new way to do the things that she loves that doesn't involve propping up these looters.
Well, let's look at one final excerpt, and then we will move on to what everybody's been waiting for, which is the winners. And the final excerpt on this third prompt is from Adam Hull, who goes to school at the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, Canada. And he writes, "There is no other way besides using one's mind to successfully navigate through life and its obstacles. So to deny one's mind would be to discard that which permits one to live. Thus, acting without the guidance of thought can only lead to death. It is this dichotomy between the mind and body that Dagny's condemning when she declares that life should not be a series of circles. A circle represents motion that does not lead anywhere, or action that lacks purpose. This is the only type of action possible when there is a divide between mind and body. As the mind is required to direct action toward a purpose, Dagny has always found this reprehensible and agrees wholeheartedly when Francisco tells her that the most depraved type of person is the man without a purpose. Her indecisiveness and accompanying anguish are not due to a moral shortcoming, but result from a logical error. Her struggle is born of a contradiction in her thinking. The contradiction is that she has always considered operating the railroad to be her one true calling, the position she was born to occupy, and the purpose of her life. But she's now being presented with the fact that her efforts are serving the people, an ideology that she despises, and making her miserable in the process." This point about the mind-body split that Dagny abhors is a really good one, and there might even be more to it than the author realizes, because while it's true that Dagny, in many different respects in the novel, is a real opponent of this mind-body split, of the idea that there are values in theory that we can't achieve in practice, one of the interesting things about her character is that because she faces this dilemma, because she can't find a central purpose in her life that is self-sustaining, whether at Taggart Transcontinental or at the cabin in Woodstock, because of that dilemma, she's starting to feel a kind of sympathy for the very theory-practice dichotomy that she herself abhors, because since she can't actually find a purpose, it's starting to look like her ideals are unattainable. And this is something that horrifies herself, that she herself is feeling in a way sympathetic to something that she opposes. And so it's evidence that there is some kind of contradiction in her thinking that she needs to overcome. And I think the way that Leah described is the way that she ultimately does it, that she realizes that the contradiction came from assuming that she could, in effect, save the world by helping her enemies. And that, among other premises, is what she has to reject. So before we move to the winners in just a moment, we have one last commercial message from your sponsors at the Ayn Rand Institute that we would like to share. And this is one that I hope will interest those of you, especially who've gotten as far as placing in the final places for this contest. If you've done that, it's because you've displayed already an exemplary understanding of Ayn Rand's novels and of the ideas behind them. And if you've gotten that far, you may want to go further. You may want to explore them all the way down to the root. And that's what the Objectivist Academic Center is for. I mentioned that I am an instructor in that. Sam, as a junior fellow, is also one of our TAs. The Objectivist Academic Center, the OAC, is the Ayn Rand Institute's premier academic training program. You can learn about it if you go to aynrand.org/OAC. It's a 2-year undergraduate level program instructing you in Ayn Rand's philosophy, along with a number of other thinking and communication skills. We accept applications, I believe, in the spring for admission in the fall. So it works just like a university program insofar as it has semesters, and there's a 2-year program, and then you are certified at the end if you finish. There's also graduate level offerings for those who complete the first 2 years of the program. Now that's a lot. The OAC is a lot of work. It's like 8 to 12 hours a week if you're really serious about it. You may want to try something lighter at first, and that's what the second item on the list is for. Sam, you want to tell people about that?
Yeah, so the second item is the Ayn Rand University app, which is available on Apple and Android devices. And we also you can also access the content on our website, the ARI campus portion of our website. This app and this website is a place where you can listen to hours and hours of courses, talks, lectures about Ayn Rand's ideas, analyzing them, going deeper, explaining her philosophy and applying it to different aspects of life. There are a lot of options that you can listen to on there, and there are courses that range from beginner level material all the way up to very advanced subjects. So there's something on there for everyone who has any interest at all in Ayn Rand, which I imagine if you're watching, you do.
Hours and hours of free courses and lectures on the ARU app. Many of our OAC students have gone through all of them. They've exhausted their interest there, and then because they want more, they come to take the live classes and get the live feedback. All right, well, we're at the point that everyone's waited for. I don't think we're going to have time to take questions, just because we've already gone an hour and I think 15 minutes or so, and we want to now talk about the winners. So we have third place winners, we have second place winners, and first place winners. And there are going to be 5 third place, 3 second, and 1 first place winner. So we will start, Sam, with the third place winners. And do you want to tell us who they are?
Yes. Okay. The third place winners, of whom there are 5, are Adam Hull of the University of Western Ontario, London, Ontario; Rachel Johnson at Brigham Young University in Rexburg, Idaho; Austin Kilgore of Londonderry High School, Londonderry, New Hampshire; Madison Reed, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, Alabama, United States; and Annika Selke at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. Congratulations to all of you. We're very, very happy to have read your essays, and we hope that you enjoy your prize money. So big congratulations to our third place winners. Ben, do you want to introduce the second place winners?
Yes, and the second place prize is for $2,500. And so now is the moment where when you don't see your name on this list, you're going to know that you won first. That you won first prize. But let's congratulate our second place winners, and they are David Chavez Salazar, again from Catalonia, Spain; Leah Deegan from Pasadena City College; and Maya Ganesh, who's at Bowling Green High School, Bowling Green, Kentucky, in the United States. That's $2,500. Spend it well. There are our winners. And that leads us to first place. Drum roll. If you've been paying attention doing process of elimination, you already know who it is, but let's take it out of the envelope, as it were, anyway. And I see we have some sound effects. First place winner this year's Atlas Shrugged contest for a prize of $10,000 goes to Mariah Williams, who's a graduate student at Regis University in Denver. And if things are working correctly, there's Mariah. I think we are even going to be able to bring her on to join. Hi,
I'm
Mariah.
crying.
Congratulations. Was it a surprise?
It was a huge surprise. Oh, wow. Oh, this is going to mean the world to my own creative writing, which I think is a huge tribute and honor to Ayn Rand's legacy. I'm choking up, sorry.
That's great. No,
But
that's okay.
thank you to all of you.
You're welcome. I wanted to ask a few questions. What first
Sure.
led you to read Atlas Shrugged?
Well, it was actually I tell people when they ask me that, actually it was asked of me yesterday, that sometimes we think of literary works being recommended by people who are older than we are. And it was actually a young man who recommended that I dive into Atlas Shrugged. And that's what got me started. I think I started reading it, and 4 days later came up for air. It was like a total immersion experience. And I think I've read it all the way through about 4 times since then. And one of my favorite things to do, one of my favorite ways that I read it, was this past year in April. I was completing a capstone project at my university and needed something to take my mind, to really center my focus so that I wasn't thinking 24/7 about my capstone, and thought, okay, I know what would be stimulating, Ayn Rand. So I jumped on the site to look for a course, and there was one on Atlas Shrugged that Greg and Ben were leading. And it was just incredible. I made it a goal this was April, and I knew I had to get to the finish line with my capstone by May. So I thought, I'm going to do this. It was 30 chapters, I think. I'm going to do this in the month of April. So that's what I did. I immersed myself for about 2 hours a day. I think it was about 2 hours each session, and read the book again, and then still finished my capstone. So it was an incredible process. But what it did, Sam, I think it was in one of the groups this week that someone said something like, she is scrambling my mind. And that's what Ayn Rand does. She scrambles your brain in a really good way. And the process of doing that then impacted my own work. But then it also, of course, gave me ideas for this year's essay competition. So
I'm really happy that you got a lot from the Atlas project. This is a 60-hour course or something like that we did back in 2017 on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of the book. And we did it in part hoping that it would remain as a resource that people could use in the future when they did just the kind of thing that you did. So it's really fulfilling to know that it reached its target in that way. So why did you choose the essay prompt that you did, the one on double lives?
I think because we see so many examples in society, and that's part of what I write about too, where double lives are used for devious purposes. And it just really caught my attention. And I thought, but wait, Francisco and one of my other favorite characters from literature, the Scarlet Pimpernel, they have used it to support their values. And wouldn't that be a nice counterpoint to writing about all of these, devious secret lives and double lives? So,
and why'd you pick the Scarlet Pimpernel rather than Bruce Wayne?
Okay. Well, way back when I saw Anthony Andrews and Jane Seymour in the movie version of the Scarlet Pimpernel, I kind of fell in love. So that was just like, really thought that the way they brought the character to life was great. And then that led me to the book. And so that's.
Yeah, I've never seen the movie. I've read the book.
Oh, okay.
Check it out.
Okay, I highly recommend it. Yeah. Anthony Andrews, who's more well known for Brideshead Revisited, but he really, I think that's his best performance. And that's what struck me, just what you brought out earlier in this this webinar, was that they really had that fundamental difference that Percy Blakeney is almost nothing like what the Scarlet Pimpernel is behind the scenes. So, but Francisco retained some of his qualities.
So I have one last question, and as I understand, you're a graduate student and you've been studying psychology and creative writing.
That's
But this
correct.
is a story. This is a story about people who run railroads and steel mills and copper mines. What did you find appealing about these characters as someone coming from your background?
Okay, well, one of my earlier careers was as a businesswoman, and I did. I think that's why the young man recommended it in the first place. I did go at
Mhm.
it like Dagny. I was just a very, starting a new branch of my business. Every time I turned around, it was a life and business coaching business. So I also coached many business owners, and some of them had um, the characteristics of the heroes of Atlas Shrugged, both male and female. Actually, most of them did. Whether or not they were running a business, they had these big dreams, big ideas, tons of potential and talent, and a sense deep inside that the world can be a better place and a drive to get there. So,
Yeah, I think one of the things that the story drove home for me when I read it for the first time was that there's artists are not the only ones who are creative. That business people are
that's
too.
right. That's right. Entrepreneurs. I mean, that is huge generative energy to be an entrepreneur. It's
Any
birthing
plans for the
something
money?
every. Well, like most writers, it will be hugely appreciated, quit your day job and work on your writing. It's the kind of thing that but I do have actually, thanks to this degree, my degree program, I do have a screenplay finished, 3 more in progress, and then 3 memoirs almost finished. So
Wow.
it's, not just starting the writing process, but really giving me the energy and luxury to get those projects to the finish line. And some of my professors are very excited about them, think they have big potential. So we'll see. It will hopefully pay tribute to Ayn Rand.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing what comes of that, and we hope that you'll stay in touch.
Well, thank you very much. I know I will. So I I think I told Jonathan yesterday when he interviewed me that I felt like Greg and Ben were my best friends by the time I finished the April Atlas project, just finding minds that were digging into those ideas the way that you do, and really appreciate what all of you do there and how you keep these values and ideas alive.
Well, thank you so much, Mariah, for joining us. Willing to be on camera in a moment like this. Really happy to have you here.
Well, thank
We're
you
going
very
to.
much.
Yeah, congratulations, Mariah, and I look forward to keep seeing you at our reading group meetings as well.
I'm enjoying them, so thank you.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Well, we want to, of course, congratulate all of our winners. There's a full list of them, which will now be available on our website, including the people who got honorable mention and who didn't place. I can't remember the number of those. How many was it, Sam? That will be at aynrand.org/contests.
It's 25.
25 honorable mentions. Great. Well, thank you to everybody for attending and watching our discussion of these excellent essays this evening. Whether you're a student who's participating in the contest, whether you're a teacher who's encouraged your students to participate in the contest in the past, we also want to thank the network of volunteer graders who helped make this possible by putting in the work that it takes to sort through hundreds and hundreds of essays. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, last but certainly not least, the donors who supported this contest by providing the prize money and the money that it takes to fund the infrastructure of the Ayn Rand Institute, where this essay has really been the premier this contest has been the premier program of the Institute since its founding in the 80s, and we really make it a priority, and we're so happy to be able to celebrate this essay with all of you online now that we have technology to do it. So I'll just say thank you again, and I'll hand you off to Sam, who's going to give you some final reminders.
Yeah, so just a few final reminders for our participants who did not win the grand prize. You can participate again in the 2022 contest so long as you still meet the grade level requirements. The application for the contest is now open at aynrand.org patreon.com/contests. So we hope to see you again, and we hope that anyone watching who's interested and who's eligible enters an essay, because we love reading them and we love talking about them and celebrating our winners. Also, if you want to read another book by Ayn Rand, I want to remind you of the free books offer that I mentioned earlier in the broadcast. AynRand.org/free books is where you can submit a form to read another book, and there are a lot of options to choose from. So I'll just repeat what Ben said and say thank you to everyone who attended, all of the students and teachers, and of course the graders and the donors who made this contest possible. It was a lot of fun, and we really enjoy doing this.
And if you're watching this on any of our social media channels, like on Facebook, where I think we're broadcasting this across 3 different Facebook pages, the Atlas Shrugged Facebook page, the Ayn Rand Facebook page, and the page of the Ayn Rand Institute, you should know that there are other ways to follow us and our commentary on the world. If you're watching on the Ayn Rand page, consider following the Ayn Rand Institute page, where we publish a lot more than what you see just about Ayn Rand on the Ayn Rand page. We have a YouTube channel as well where many people are watching. You can watch weekly podcasts from the Ayn Rand Institute. Just go look up Ayn Rand Institute on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. Follow that, get notifications, and you'll get regular updates from us. Otherwise, we will be back, I believe, in September to announce the winners for our other essay contests, the Atlas Shrugged, the Fountainhead contest and the Anthem contest. And looking forward to doing that with you again. This is, I think, one of the happiest occasions of the year here at the Institute, and we're really happy to share that with you. So good evening, everyone. Thank you, Sam.